months, she lived in gut-wrenching silence. For months, she's endured the distance, the unspoken rejection, the lack of affection, the lack of intimacy, the unrelenting sense that something was off. He had secrets that didn't include her, but she couldn't muster the courage to confront this stranger in her bed. So she chose loneliness over truth. But no matter how much she convinced herself that she's the problem, the secrets turned into violence. Not only was she never emotionally safe, now she wasn't physically safe. A divorce, a cross-country move, and a healing journey later, she met someone genuinely good, someone who treated her the way she always prayed to be treated. But her body, her psyche, didn't understand that the war was over. When you've survived a relationship where neither your heart nor your body was safe, the trauma doesn't disappear when the bad guy goes away. It stays in your nervous system. It makes you look at a safe and loving individual and ask, how can I ever trust you when I couldn't even trust myself? If you are in a relationship where you're constantly walking on eggshells, or you've escaped a relationship but feel like you're still living in the wreckage, you can rebuild. There is a safe place. You just need the roadmap to get there. Whether you're a trauma survivor or you love someone who is a trauma survivor, this series is your GPS roadmap to finding that safe place to rest your heart. Okay, just like any GPS, we have to set our location. And we're going to do that by visiting what emotional safety is, why it's important in relationships, what types of relationships suffer from lack of emotional safety. We're going to talk about whether you are or are not in an emotionally safe relationship. Then we're going to talk about how to build an emotionally safe relationship. In the next episode, we'll visit the real individual behind the vignette at the beginning of this episode. Let's get started. Emotional safety. You can be entirely yourself, including your flaws, your fears, your vulnerabilities, without fear of judgment, criticism, or retaliation. Now, why is emotional safety so important in relationships? Well, without emotional safety, even the strongest connection can feel uncertain. But when you have an emotionally safe relationship, they become a respite, a place of comfort, where there's honesty and mutual support. Now, emotional safety also allows us to show up authentically in all relationships. Now, this is especially important when one or both of the partners have trauma histories. We are not used to being able to express ourselves, to speak truth to a situation. We are generally, because of the trauma, shut down inside. We're shut down in some area that causes us to find it more safe not to speak, not to show vulnerabilities, not to show fear, or not to talk about that. It's safer in a traumatizing situation. So when we've been in a traumatizing relationship and we want to develop a healthy relationship down the line, it's not that easy to step outside of the fear identity that we've developed to protect ourselves in trauma. So it takes some work to develop and build the ability to even want to be vulnerable. And emotional safety requires vulnerability on the part of both people. Vulnerability is something that we have not enjoyed in trauma relationships, previous toxic relationships, a toxic upbringing. Vulnerability is no bueno in those situations. So it takes determination to flip that switch and allow yourself to be vulnerable in a relationship. But the person you're in relationship with has to have certain skills as well in order for them to demonstrate consistently that they are allowing you a safe place for all of that. Now, I want y'all to understand this is difficult because the person that has to be vulnerable is generally walking on some kind of psychological eggshells because their past has taught them that that vulnerability makes them prey in a traumatic situation. In other words, the person that needs the safe place is by default shutting down vulnerabilities that allow the other person to be that safe place. So the other person has to be strong enough to be consistent and understand that the trust that's required on the part of the traumatized person is built over time as they see that consistency in the relationship. Now, what types of relationships can suffer from lack of emotional safety? Well, any relationship can suffer from lack of emotional safety. Romantic relationships can suffer from a lack of emotional safety. It's romantic relationships that we'll mostly focus on in this series. But family relationships can suffer as well. Friendships can suffer, and so can professional relationships. Because trauma erodes our ability to trust and be emotionally available or to tolerate, again, vulnerability. Now, where family relationships are concerned, there's often deep tensions and resentment or refusal to acknowledge or discuss the past. Now, when you're having to have this relationship with this family member or family members, it's difficult or almost impossible for the traumatized victim to find emotional safety. So even in supportive families, trauma can make communication strained or guarded. That's why I think a lot of people decide to disengage from family relationships when it's been toxic. They've tried and tried and tried. They've come past the point where they think they need that person's acknowledgement in order for them to heal. That takes a long time. So once they get past, okay, I'm taking control of this, I'm going to heal in spite of the fact that they want to be stuck on stupid. When you reach that milestone, then you move into the next phase of healing. But in that next phase of healing, people often become estranged in order to maintain their psychological safety and to maintain their mental health. So even though psychological safety is very important to moving past the trauma with the perpetrator, if they're in the families, or if the families don't want to acknowledge that the perpetrator did something to you, then so be it. You may decide to become estranged, but understand that that's because you weren't able to find that emotional safety in that relationship or with the family unit or individuals in that family unit in order for them to be able to give you that safe place. Recognizing what a safe place is and understanding you have every right to that safe place doesn't mean that other people will cooperate, if that makes any sense. Trauma survivors who become parents might find it hard to regulate their own emotions or respond calmly to stress or form secure attachments to their children. And this often triggers a cycle of guilt and self-doubt. So the parental relationship, you're the traumatized parent, and that's unresolved, then it's hard for you to even be a safe place for your children. So what we often wind up doing, and I was guilty of this, as a mother, I would be so wound up all the time that I would yell at, I'll tell you one, let me tell you this situation. Story time. So I came downstairs one day and found my teenage daughter with a bowl of milk. She had eaten the cereal out of it, and she was pouring an entire bowl of milk down the drain. Okay, everybody understands that that is not World War II. There's no need to set off a freaking emotional bomb over the milk. That it would have been simpler and more appropriate to just tell her, look, babe, don't throw away the milk like that. Pour less on your cereal, but that's muddy down the drain. Honey, did I do that? No. I went off. I can't tell you what I said, but I know I was yelling and hollering and screaming. So later on, I was talking to my husband about it. He told me straight up, yeah, your response was way over the top, completely unnecessary. And he was right. All I could do was shut up. Did I go back and apologize? No. That's what I needed to do to provide her more emotional safety. She was already traumatized from the whole thing of growing up in Detroit and being separated from me and all of that. But no, I'm so stuck in my own trauma that I just, bam, just flew off the handle. That was not good. Period. So what I wound up doing, and this is a demonstration of how that plays out. My relationship with my mother growing up wasn't that great, and I always told myself I wasn't going to be her, which was she was not emotional. I didn't understand till long down the line why that she would just not be that emotional place for me, okay? But I became her. Talk all day long about I'm not going to be like you, and I became her. So the truth of the matter is we do become whatever that is for us or for you when we fail to address the trauma. So I was not an emotionally safe place for my daughter when I should have been. So let's talk about careers now, because this plays out in the workplace. We call it psychological safety. And employees have to be psychologically safe in order to work in teams, in order to submit to authority. Trauma survivors may struggle with taking good feedback from other people. You know, sometimes when as a leader you see an employee who is overly self-reliant or acting like they got it all together, that's just a defense mechanism. Sometimes they're avoidant. Sometimes they're highly emotionally charged in situations that you wouldn't think that they would be. But otherwise, they're a good employee. So how do you navigate that? This is where psychological safety becomes important in the workplace. Here are some signs that you are not in an emotionally safe relationship. You are constantly subjected to criticism, sarcasm, and dismissiveness. You are walking around on eggshells trying not to trigger yet another attack. Your partner withholds affection or uses the silent treatment as punishment. You're getting gaslighted and told your feelings are not valid. Worse than that, don't even exist, or turning it into something, your feelings into something negative, and blaming you for whatever situation you're feeling something about. Also, if you are subjected to retaliation, whenever you communicate your boundaries, if you're constantly getting shut down, your boundaries are being challenged, crossed, disregarded, you are not in an emotionally safe relationship. Now, here are signs that you are in an emotionally safe relationship. You can talk about difficult topics without fear of being shut down or punished. You each respect one another's boundaries, each other, and you can say no and communicate them without guilt or pressure. Your feelings are acknowledged and validated rather than minimized or ignored. You each own your mistakes and make genuine efforts to make amends and learn from them. Differences of opinion are discussed without shouting, guilt trips, or passive aggression. There's always room for growth, there's room for disagreement, and even room for mistakes without fear of rejection. Now, this is how you build emotional safety in relationship, whether you're in a relationship where only one person is traumatized or whether you both are traumatized, whatever. Communicate your needs clearly. If something feels off or overwhelming, say so. Even if your voice shakes, it's okay to ask for space, reassurance, or clarification between you. If you feel like you're not quite understanding, it's fine to make space for you to ask some clarification. Now, understand this, that in communicating your needs, you don't need to explain your trauma to justify your boundaries. Okay? You don't need to make a case for your boundaries. Also, in the communication dynamic, it's okay to say, I'm not ready to talk about that. And that should be enough in order for you guys to give it a rest until you get a hold of your emotions and can come back and discuss it more objectively. In the interest of this communication, I'm going to suggest that you guys come up with some ground rules for how you're going to deal with difficult conversations or places where you have differing opinions. One thing you could do is come up with a safe word or a safe phrase that you guys agree that if either one of you says it, the other one steps down. No questions asked. And then agree to a certain amount of time that you'll give each other to cool down or process or whatever the heck they need to do. Now you guys need to agree to this safe phrase, and you need to agree to the amount of time you're going to give each other, okay, before you come back together. Now, this is not to be used in order to punish each other. It's not to be used to get back at each other. It's not to be used frivolously. This has to be used truly for conversations where you are not able to get a hold of your emotions. You need to get away and process through some of your triggers so that you can come back and discuss this more objectively. Be sure to do that because that'll go a long way to helping you guys when you're trying to discuss difficult topics. Build trust slowly. This trust dynamic is not something that can be switched on and off. Trust is built situation by situation, incident by incident, over time. And understand, as either one of you, whether you're traumatized and having trouble with vulnerability, or your partner is traumatized and having trouble with vulnerability, understand that neither one of y'all can make the other one do anything. And as much as you know in your heart that you're a safe place for somebody you love, that doesn't matter as much as you're consistently standing your trustful ground, situation by situation and incident by incident, and showing practically that you are that safe place. And sometimes you are going to get frustrated. Sometimes you're going to feel impatient. Sometimes you're going to want to throw up your hands and give up. Understand that all of those things may happen, but rest in the fact that you are doing the right thing. Okay. And understand that just because you're doing the right thing doesn't mean that they are going to choose to trust that in every situation until they come to see that consistency over time. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when I introduce you to the lady on which the opening vignette was based. But for right now, understand that you can't make him or her do any daggum thing, and they have to understand that on your part too. And they have to understand that as they see this consistency in the relationship, that they can let down their guard and be more vulnerable over time. The next thing is practice self-regulation. This is very important to develop that consistency over time, because you're going to be triggered. I mean, human beings, nobody in the relationship has cornered the market on freaking triggers, okay? And everybody in the relationship is human, and not everybody going to be in the mood to do the right thing in day. Let's just be real. That's the reality of it. But when you're in those situations, it's very important that you understand yourself enough to regulate yourself in those situations. And if you're the traumatized person in the relationship, self-regulation is key, because you're going to default to your traumatized self. And if you can recognize that in the moment and kind of ground yourself in reality, it will go a long way to helping you to regulate yourself. When we are traumatized, you heard that thing, the body knows it. The body takes count or whatever. I don't know how it goes. But anyway, you got these emotional and physical dynamics that are going on that you always defaulted to. So that if we don't recognize our triggers and understand where those triggers came from in a current situation that is completely different, there's absolutely no threat involved, and reality would say that this is not a time to be acting out from trauma in a split second. Now, this last one, we will go into in depth. I will probably dedicate an entire episode to this. This is the secret sauce. Take a minute to like, hype, subscribe, and at the end of the video, give me your thoughts and questions about today's episode. Thanks. And building emotional safety in your relationship. I call it put a face on it. Put a face on it. What does that mean? That means that You not only need to to know what your triggers are, you could probably list them left and right, okay? But the deeper work comes when you put a face on that trigger. So to understand your triggers, you have to know who or what inflicted the original wound behind the trigger. You got to recognize that your partner is not the face behind the trigger. And don't treat them as though they are the original cause of that trigger. You want to notice the moments when you feel anxious, shut down, reactive in a relationship. What's happening in those moments? What's really happening? Are there specific tones or personalities or words or certain behaviors that remind you of your past subconsciously? Understand, it's subconscious. It's not going to be in your face. You have to work to know the answers to these questions and understand your emotional landscape. Okay? That'll give you more control over how you respond. And then you can make a game plan to ensure that you're not sidetracking a relationship by the same triggers repeatedly. Well, that's the end of this episode. In the next episode, we're going to listen in on a real conversation between the woman at the beginning of this video and her new husband. So always remember, your greatest power is realizing the truth of who you are. Be sure to know that truth.